If you're someone who's passionate about transforming education, which you are if you're listening to this podcast, you should check out the Charles Koch Foundation. The Charles Koch Foundation supports social entrepreneurs and organizations that are embracing innovation to build better solutions for today's learners. Visit ckf.org to learn more. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Fast and furious. We are approaching 400. Can you believe it? Some days I can't. 400 episodes. In fact, by the time this episode comes out, we'll be probably well past 400 because we're about a month out from releasing these episodes. How we got to 400 so fast, I have no idea. But if you look at the body of work, head to edupexperience.com and check out the guests that we've had, almost 100, trending toward 150 college and university presidents, EdTech CEOs, presidents all over the place. It just continues to catch on fire. In fact, we're going to be spending the better, and I actually have a button for that, by the way.
Fire.
Okay, can you do like catch on fire? I should have timed that better. But the point is that we're going to be possibly at a number of very well-known higher education conferences this year, recording live. So I hope to meet many of my guests that I know will visit those conferences. Hint, hint, stay tuned. You know, we're writing a book called Commencement, the Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education. You can also check out commencementthebook.com, where I'll be, along with my co-author, Kate Colbert, bringing together all of those themes from all of these college and university presidents and influencers into a book, so you don't have to go back and listen to 400 episodes. Who would do that? No one will do that. So again, I'm rambling, but you can go to the website and you can find the episodes that resonate most with you because we categorize everything. So anyway, let's get beyond all the self-plugging and get to our guest today. Ladies and gentlemen, he is in it. Let's just say that. He is in and around higher education. He has been for a long time. Here he comes, ladies and gentlemen. His name is Paul Freedman. He's the president of the Learning Marketplace at Guild Education. Paul, what's happening?
Wow, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Did you know that you were going to get an applause today, Paul?
I didn't know I was going to get an applause, and some people were standing in the audience, and I always love it.
It's literally incredible. They won't stop. They won't sit down for you. All these people here listening to us. But Paul, it's we've been I would say we've been chasing you for a while, but we've been connected for a while. In fact, there's a story that I'd like you to tell. It's a story of a company called Entangled Ventures, I believe, that once upon a time was growing very rapidly, had its tentacles into a lot of facets of education. And tell me the Entangled Venture story as we move toward the Guild Education story.
Sure. Yes. So Entangled was an EdTech studio. And what that means is that we built education technology companies. The way that we did that is that we had a innovation design consulting firm called Entangled Solutions. It was kind of a cross between IDEO meets McKinsey for the education world. And we partnered that organization with philanthropies like the Gates Foundation and others. We worked with innovative universities. We worked with innovative companies, thinking about the future of education for their own employees. And we used that insight and those relationships to build businesses. Like when we'd work with organizations and figure out, the cause of their problem was that there wasn't a company that was doing a particular technology or a particular service, and then we would go out and build that technology and service. And we built, about a company a year. Those included, Re-Up Education, PathStream, and others that are, sort of successfully innovating in and around the higher education future of work landscape. We also invested in businesses that we thought were moving the needle in terms of the future of higher education, and those investments, included like Stellic, and the very first company we invested in was Guild Education.
Interesting. Cool. So how long did you run that company for?
And just about 6 years.
All right. And so how fast was the growth that you experienced? Obviously meteoric in a way, right?
It was pretty fast growth. I mean, as a studio company, it's sort of hard. You don't measure growth the same way you would measure growth for a product company by like users or by revenue. But we were at the time that we got acquired by Guild, we were about 100 people. We had a pretty large and impactful consulting practice, and we were really sort of getting involved in some of the more exciting projects, working with all the innovative universities on future of education stuff, really interesting companies. And then the goal was to build a product company a year, and we had built a number that had either exited or a number that were really kind of supercharging the higher education landscape. It's hard to measure how big that was, but it was pretty fast growth and pretty exciting.
So tell me this story. So Guild comes to you, or you go to Guild and you say, look, we've got all these incubated companies. We've invested in EdTech significantly. Guild at that point, I don't know, was probably what, like $2 billion still in terms of its market cap. I think trending towards $4 billion now. Huge company, right? And an innovative model with Guild that I think they've really blazed in that marketplace in terms of, well, a marketplace, a higher education marketplace. I guess that's the word I should be using. And how does that happen? And are you, tell me, like, are you going, I don't know. I mean, we've grown so much, or is this just like this perfect fit moment? Or
so I mentioned that we one of the first companies we invested in was Guild itself. And so as a result, we were, Rachel was an advisor of mine. Rachel, CEO of Guild, and was an advisor of mine. I was an advisor of hers. Like, we kept in pretty close, touch. Just
you had talked about it.
General. Yeah, we just talked in general about how things were going, and the whole time. What was increasingly happening, and what was ultimately the logic behind the merger was that more and more, as we were getting insight around the biggest opportunities in the future of education, future of work, the ones that we were getting most excited about, all our best whiteboard ideas, were really just things that Guild should do. They were just sort of features on what Guild had been built. And so, it felt like where the puck was going in education was where Guild was. And it was sort of after, and we had a number of lightweight partnerships with Guild through the years. We would do conferences together. We'd do some consulting work together. There's certain companies that we had built that ended up partnering with Guild. We were partners and collaborators. But after Guild did their Series E, Rachel and I talked about look, how can we work more closely together than we have in the past? And every sort of model that we went through, joint venture or deep partnership structure, or so, it just was all complicated. And it got to the point where I said, hey, is this just better? And I don't remember who said it first, but is it just better that we just join forces here, and that we and that ultimately that's what ended up happening. Our team came into Guild, myself included, a lot of our other leaders who had very specific experience in education, innovators, product people, consulting people, came really throughout Guild and helped, supercharge what was already a very successful organization. And it's played out, not all mergers and acquisitions play out really well, but it's been almost 2 years. And I think we've done exactly what we'd hoped, which is it allowed the people from an Entangled perspective to double down on really the most important mission, I think, in this whole landscape. And it allowed Guild to get, a whole wealth of talent and experience and know-how really across the enterprise to help drive its success.
Amazing.
What exactly? So let's just imagine that's the average higher ed person. Let me see the average higher ed person. Let's say we take somebody from traditional higher education with embedded experience and a very traditional institution, looking at something like Guild, going, what is it exactly? So if you had to explain it to somebody at a grocery store or somebody in higher ed that doesn't fully understand what the model is, give us that elevator speech on what is Guild Education and how does it help students and schools?
So, Guild, our mission is to unlock opportunity and economic mobility for working adult learners. That's what we're all about. The way that we do that is that we basically disrupted, what was the tuition reimbursement market. So, most large employers, I think it's 82%, have some form of program where they provide a tuition subsidy to their employees. Almost always, that program is done by reimbursement. Someone has to take out their credit card pay for the program, and they may or may not, based on what grades they get, whatever the policies in place, get reimbursed for it. It's really actually a pretty discriminatory program, not intentionally, but pretty discriminatory, because you can think about the types of people who have a $10,000 credit card balance to be able to afford tuition payments. And so the usage is very low. It's like 1% to 2% utilization, and the people who use it are primarily affluent back office, and so Guild, came to the market by entirely rethinking that and creating a program that removes the debt, moves payments. So students don't have to touch the payments, goes directly from the employer to the academic institution, removes a lot of the friction around the application process. And as a result, we've saw incredibly larger utilization and greater utilization from the folks who need education the most, which are, essentially are largely frontline employees. And so that's how we broke into the market. Increasingly, we're moving into measuring ourselves by career mobility. And what we found is that the students who are participating in Guild are sometimes, like 7.5 times more likely. That's a real data point from at Chipotle. 7.5 times more likely to be promoted to frontline manager. And so increasingly, we're orienting our programs and our model to be about mobility, and that aligning the programs that we offer with where job opportunities are just in the market in general, and with our partner employer, and expanding from what was originally mostly just university degree programs to increasingly short form boot camps, credentials, things that can ladder to a degree, but also can provide a shorter term pathway to mobility.
Is that the trend right now? So, you're in charge of the marketplace. Is the trend the non-credit or maybe short for credit programs that are going to allow somebody to skill up and get, given the coronavirus economy and future of work, is that where the trend is, or is that still a stepping stone towards a degree because people still see value?
It's both. It's in both. There's been a lot of conversation about is the college degree, which you look historically, nothing has been a better unlock for economic mobility in the history of this country than a bachelor's degree, and it continues to be. Some people sort of say that's the only path. Other people say, hey, the college degree doesn't really provide the skills of the future, and students aren't necessarily prepared for jobs, and the future is all about short format boot camps, non-credit. Guild takes a yes and approach. We actually think it's very much both those things are necessary and true, and we are big believers in job-oriented, career-oriented programs that stack to a college degree, and there's a big emphasis on stackability. So we think the future is stackability, and that because that creates sort of infinite optionality for our learners. A student can start with a program that's very focused on data visualization. They can get a promotion to a job that provides more economic mobility, more stability, and then a few years later, if they want to be the manager of their data visualization team, they can go back, use the credits that they've earned to get a bachelor's degree. And so we're really trying to push the market on thinking about these things not as either or, but as yes and both.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Because it's not nothing's mutually exclusive, and we've had so many conversations around the value, and it seems to trend to one direction or the other, right? It's skills. This is what the consumer wants. No, they still want degrees, and the yes and is the right one, right? Because everybody's going to be different. Everybody's going to take a different path, and that path might be defined over time and not immediacy.
That's right.
It might not be about seat time. It might be about prior learning assessment, and there's all of these different pathways towards gaining. And what is the definition of a quote unquote higher education? That's even something that I think we're wrestling with in our society. Is what does that mean, degree, or does it mean some skill that you gain after your undergraduate degree is completed, or some skill that gets you a job, because that counts, right? Employers are looking at it in all different ways. Getting back to the point about Guild and its friction, and that's the really important point that I'd like you to talk a little bit more about, because it's not just friction from the front end, from the student end, which a lot of organizations, and I say institutions, need to consider, because students are not about friction anymore, not when you can get information 24/7. And as an employer, if you have to vet individual schools one by one, there's a lot of friction there. It takes an infrastructure, employees, and so on. So Guild takes out that piece of the friction too, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There are very, very small number of employers who are interested in or taken on the challenge of trying to do what we've done for themselves. It's a pretty hard task. I mean, there are 4,300 accredited four-year and two-year institutions. There's, if you add boot camps to it, there's another 3,000 whatever programs focused on working adult learners to some degree. They don't, not all the programs are of the same quality. Not all of them have the same opportunity to scale. Not all of them have the same alignment to job and career needs. We spend a lot of time on the process of curation, and we partner with a subset of institutions, ones that really have strong programs for working adults. And then we to reduce the friction even further for both employers and students, we do deep integrations with those schools so that we're getting the data so that we can coach students. Because another thing to think about as you're talking about the progression to any kind of degree, whether even if it takes 6 months or takes 6 years, when you're talking about a working adult, you're talking about balancing that educational experience with life, with going to school and taking care of your kids, and stuff comes up. And so we have provide real human coaches for all of our students. In order to be able to coach, you need data on whether students still enrolled and how they're progressing, and so that work that we do really sort of connects up what we call the learning marketplace. And it would be really difficult for an employer to do what we're doing at the kind of scale. And so yeah, we focus on trying to reduce frictions from all sides. The idea of somebody being able to, while they're working, get an education that then allows them to get a better job. There's enough challenge with that process itself. Like, our job is to from both the employer and the employee, take as much friction out of the process as possible.
One of the episodes we did, I don't know, it was a while back now, was with Dr. Lo Stomsky. She's the senior vice president of learning, associate learning for Walmart. And she's like overseeing the learning and pathways for 2.5 million associates at Walmart. I know Guild and Walmart work closely together. In fact, she was talking about Guild on the episode. And this, I'm going to ask you the same question, but I said, look, you're Walmart, right? You hold the keys to so many people and their pathway towards education. And there isn't a university on the face of the earth that wouldn't like access to those employees. Her favorite sound effect was this:
access denied.
Right? Because she was actually talking about the fact that, like, I don't have time to do all that. I got to take care of 2.5 million people. So you come back to Guild and you say, who holds the keys? And Paul, you kind of hold the keys a little bit. So I'm sure there's a ton of institutions that want access to these large institutions. How do you decide what's the criteria, to work with Guild? Because I'm sure you have more interest than availability at some level, like supply and demand.
Yeah, well, so the learning marketplace is what we call triple curated, right? So Guild goes out and it tries to find what the best in the world institutions for serving our learners, which are working adults. And we want a diversity of institutions. We want all, we keep expanding the kind of programs that we offer as we get bigger and bigger and bigger. So, the best in the world could be, we are the best in the world at teaching data visualization. It doesn't necessarily mean Harvard. That process is data intensive. So we ask for, and we take all of the publicly available data, which frankly isn't as much as it should be from iPads and other sources. But then we ask for private data for a school that wants to work with us. What are your outcomes in terms of job placement? How are your outcomes for diverse populations? Because the student population that Guild serves is incredibly diverse, majority minority. Where, like, how then we then we look at the actual programs itself. How aligned how well constructed is your pedagogy? How well aligned is it for the needs of working adults? We take a lot of time on what we call the process of certifying an institution. And if you work, if you go through that process, we are we're sort of saying that this is a high quality program for working adults. That's the first level of curation. Then employers choose out of the superset. So, right now it's, over 2,000 programs across 200 institutions. Out of that superset, a individual employer will choose a subset, and they'll choose a subset that are aligned for, what the kind of jobs are, what kind of mobility opportunities are at their company. So, our healthcare partners might choose sort of different program mix than our retail partners. That's the second level of curation. The third level of curation is the student themselves. And so, a big part of our coaching process, a big part of our product experience is try to map our members at that point with the school that is going to be the program that's going to be best for their desires, for their needs, where they want to go in their career. And that, as mentioned with the access denied, we find that employers want Guild's partnership in making that whole process work. It's a full-time job for a lot of people at Guild. I think we're proud of how we do it, and it's one of the benefits that we bring to bear when we partner with an employer.
Too many learners are being left behind by the current one-size-fits-all model of education. We here at EdUp and our friends at the Charles Koch Foundation see a better path forward. The Charles Koch Foundation supports innovators in education who are building and scaling new pathways to allow all learners to discover their potential. By changing the way we think about education, we can unlock opportunities for millions more Americans. To learn more about the Charles Koch Foundation support of individualized education, visit ckf.org. Going to this instead, right?
Access granted.
That's important, and she got a big kick out of that. But I mean, I think the point is that it's not just a Wild West. Where how important is speed for the institution, right? As a part of the curation process, because I could think that my institution, no matter who we're talking about, has one of the best programs in the world. Maybe the curriculum's not even dealt with not touched every 2 years, and maybe it's just got this really heavy entrance requirements, and maybe it's not adding to increase diversity. It seems like speed or market awareness or student awareness has to be front and center.
Yeah, I mean, that hypothetical institution you just described didn't sound like a very good Guild partner, right? So the ones, the organizations that we do partner with are the ones who would take the opposite view for most of those statements. They are programs that they look at often, because if you're talking about the needs of a working adult, that's largely more career aligned. So are you, teaching the things that the actual, teaching marketing the way marketing is done now, or are you teaching the way marketing was done 20 years ago? You definitely want you to look at how your outcomes are for diverse, populations, because those are the students that we serve. And so the organizations that are good fit for Guild are ones for which they've taken the working adult and made it part of their mission, and there's a lot of institutions that are like, try to doing working adult as an adjacency, because it's the growth market, the demographic cliff, or whatever you want to say about the numbers of out of high school students, that those are declining. So a lot of schools have said, oh, let's going to tack on, continuing education program, or let's go after working adults. If you're doing it as a side hustle, you're probably not a great fit for Guild. If you've really incorporated it as part of your mission, if it's being funded, if the faculty buy into it and believe in it, and it's working, then you might be. And that includes institutions that are traditional by nature. Spelman is a great partner of ours. Oregon State is a great partner of ours. University of Arizona is a great partner of ours. That's in addition to the institutions that are kind of form fit around working adults, like Southern New Hampshire. But you don't have to be built just to be doing working adult programs or online programs. You can do it from a very traditional institution, but you have to be taking it seriously. You have to be investing in it. And if you are, then, we would love to talk to you.
Yeah, that, and gosh, I love what you're saying, because it has to be an equal to, and it has to be done differently, because the adult learner is not the same as a traditional learner. The needs are different. The infrastructure is different. The support structure has to be different. The entry has to be different. And it has to be tailored to I think, a much more aware student consumer than we used to have in the past. I mean, I think that's pretty clear with the whole debt and financial literacy conversations and access. Like there are just a lot more people that are very aware of what they're taking on when they enter higher education. Would you agree with that? Based on
I love everything you just said. It's starting with the equal to, like this, ultimately, you're talking about different paths to the same education, but you're talking about the same education, and that education should have the same value, should be respected the same, and should be considered of the same merit by the institutions that are offering them. But they are they're different paths and they need to be constructed differently. It's, where the era, a lot of people had sort of very bad associations with the concept of online education because the online education that they got was classroom education thrown on Zoom because of the pandemic. That doesn't work particularly well. It's a substandard experience. But when you have, programs that were designed, to be online, designed for working adults, they can be fantastic. And that's really important. And I do think, there's I don't know if the right answer is a more informed consumer, because I think one of the challenges in education is there's just so much stuff out there that it's hard to be informed. There's such a paradox of choice. There's so many institutions. There's so much discussion. It's really hard to get good insight in perspective. I think it's you have a more concerned consumer than you've had in the past. More concerned about taking out debt, particularly more concerned about whether the college program that they're going to do is going to give them what they want, which is, most of the time a path to economic mobility. I think there's a lot of concern. I think one of the things that we have to do is, curate insight as well, because I do think it's still a very messy and noisy market as it relates to just all the stuff that's out there.
Speaking of messy and noisy, you're here on the EdUp experience. We do a little bit of that messy and noisy stuff here. One of the ways that we do that is we'll call it a mid-episode challenge. And Paul, we're gonna do a game called Higher Ed Word Association. Are you ready? I'm
pretty nervous, but let's do it.
Here we go. That's just my transition music because I feel like I'm actually in a game show when I hit it. All right, everybody, here we go. No money on the line here, Paul. No money on the line. This is a podcast, my friend. We have no money. So here we go. You ready? We're going to do this a couple times. So it doesn't have to be a single word, but it can't be a dissertation either. Your first challenge here, future of work.
More mobile.
Like it. General education.
The end of the experience, not the beginning.
Like it. Online learning.
Increasingly high quality.
A 3-year bachelor degree.
Love it. Let's do that.
Unbundled.
Maybe I should answer that for the future of education. That's the future of education. Unbundled.
Like it. Degree.
Still important.
Educational technology.
I don't even know what that means.
Educational technology. I like it. You don't know what it means.
No, I did. It lost it. A phrase, like maybe I'm getting into dissertation territory. Words that have lost all meaning.
Oh, so interesting. Okay, let's go. Let's follow that one out. All right, let me conclude. There is a conclusion. Let's talk about educational technology. Lost meaning. What do you mean? Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a when it was first defined. I was around, by the way, when it was first defined as a sector. That's how long I've been in this industry. And it had much more concrete meaning. It meant more like LMSs and student information systems. It meant technology powering education institutions.
Right.
It has now included, things that, are more educational delivery, like school, boot camps and schools themselves. I don't know what it means. And I don't think it's an effective, definition of a sector. And Guild doesn't really think of itself as an education technology company. In fact, we kind of reject the notion. We are a opportunity company and we're focused on that. I think you need words to create conferences. But I think the concept of EdTech has sort of outlived its usefulness.
What should it be called instead? I mean, not you have to have a direct answer to this, but if you think about EdTech or the way that we look at it, right? All these studies come out, EdTech is going, it's doubling and tripling, quadrupling over the investments.
Yeah, I mean, I discount a lot of that because how are you defining, if you're including Guild in that category, then you're including an organization that doesn't really think of itself that way. If you're including, are you including the aspects of Workday that are about, creating skills mapping, I think the definite, it's those things are useful to track trends in funding, but these categories are becoming less discrete. And they certainly, EdTech as a concept is very different from where it was originally founded. And you're seeing a merger between what was historically different worlds. The things that were EdTech were almost primarily higher education, K-12 serving, with the exception of learning management systems for corporations. But as you're getting a bigger intersection between the world of work and the future of work, and the future of education, the worlds are kind of combining. So again, I just like it was a great phrase. The t-shirts were fantastic, but I think it's outlived its usefulness.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I haven't heard anybody talk about that before, but I think you're right, because it goes back to what I was saying about higher education. What is higher education? How do we define it? Most people would think higher education is just a degree attainment, and that's not true anymore. Or at least it shouldn't be true anymore if people think that way, because there's so many ways to increase your knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Educational technology is one of those areas too. What is EdTech? What counts as EdTech? What doesn't? It's funny because I just use myself as an example here, but I was named like one of the top 100 EdTech people, influencers in higher ed, and I'm like, what do I do in EdTech? Oh, I have a podcast. Is that educational technology? I'm not sure. We talk about. You know,
congratulations on making that list, by the way. Very, very, very.
Thanks, man. And I was like, okay. I mean, I'll take it, but I'm wondering, you know, I didn't know podcasts were really considered EdTech, and is that because we're included in learning or whatever? Anyway, the point being is that the industry is changing. One of the ways that it's changing, let's just call it the previous vertical that was EdTech, is the merger and acquisition part of it, right? So Guild and Entangled get together. That was probably one of the biggest ones a couple of years ago, or a year. I don't remember how long it is. How long?
Almost 2 years.
2 years, yeah, because coronavirus kind of blanks your memory out.
Yeah.
But now you're seeing it more and more and more. You think that's because the industry has evolved to a point where, you know, just that people were so siloed in what they were offering from an EdTech perspective that they just are starting to group up so that they can enter higher education more forcefully, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I think consolidation is like natural as industries and things evolve. You know, you consolidate to get scale. You consolidate because things that aren't as different, you know, things that were used to be thought of as different are becoming more the same. Like, you know, a lot of 2 years acquisitions are on that path. Like, you know, it's you know, you thought that edX and, you know, degrees were like very different things years and years ago, but the reality is, you know, there's much more of a continuum. It's, you know, the what we're talking about, you know, sort of unbundling and stackability. And so a lot of the I think a lot of the consolidation is about, you know, kind of the worlds, you know, combining and what it means for business models. There's other consolidation that is just based on, you know, creating better scale. A lot, you know, the kind of the Elution type acquisitions, you know, there are those kind of companies that already own a lot of higher education relationships, you know, will always buy new technologies to be able to sell through their existing sales channels.
It's a way to increase your product set without having to develop it from the beginning, right?
That's right. And so companies that have like built a big you know, who have developed and now have a bunch of relationships, it's pretty natural for them to do innovation by acquiring smaller companies that they can sell through the channel. And so I think it's just a sign of like the development of the companies themselves and where we are as an industry. And I would expect, you know, more of it to continue.
All right. So Guild, you're at Guild now. You've been there. Competitors spring up. Right, the marketplace is becoming a higher ed concept of a higher ed marketplace is becoming much more, I don't want to say mainstream, but much more aware for people who work in higher ed and for consumers, I think. Although we're much more aware of what it is in higher ed than a consumer is aware of what a higher ed marketplace is, because it's very foreign to what our society, how our society experiences the higher ed journey, right? Because it's like, oh, you go to college or maybe you don't. Yeah, you know, how do you access it? And so I think companies like Guild are changing that for the consumer side. But how do you stay ahead? What are you going to do to keep Guild going in the right direction? Because competitors are and will continue to spring up.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are ahead, and I think with every employer and every announcement that we make, there's been, you know, a couple just in the last, you know, couple of weeks, you know, Hershey and Dollywood and Macy's, you know, we get further ahead. I think and that's, you know, that's sort of speaking from a market perspective, but it's a virtuous cycle as it relates to like our market position. As we earn the rights by working with employers to serve more students, that means we're more attractive to be able to be good partners with higher education institutions, because we can connect them to those students. As we get more higher education institutions that we're working with, we become more attractive to employers. I think the marketplace that we built up and the business model we built up, you know, kind of becomes a moving barrier to entry. And then we also stay ahead because, you know, we continue to innovate in terms of the the experience. So I talked about early on our transition to mobility. We were very early, I think, on bringing stackable programs to the market and working with employers on how to align those programs with their job needs. We started investing in moving our coaching model to be more career oriented, pretty early. I think it's when you have a company that's the largest in a market, and is also continuing to invest in innovation to stay ahead of the market. I think it becomes, that becomes a difficult environment for competitors to catch up. Usually competitors catch up if they can go faster. But if you're the big company with all of the market power and you're still very much investing in innovation, it becomes difficult.
So one of the things I love about the website is the stats. And I go, and it's 33% of Guild students are parents, 36% of Guild students are the first in their family to attend college, and 51% of Guild students are people of color. That's wrapped around the adult. Those stats are wrapped around adult students. When you're having these conversations internally, how do you define success in access, in economic mobility? When you do you get the employer data? Do you look at promotions?
Yeah.
Do you look at, time length in job? Define success from that other end.
Yes. So great question. And we do get that data. And that's one of the cool things about Guild, was one of the exciting things about for me coming into Guild, because a lot of innovation in education you tend to do with very data limited environments. Like we have a big data problem, particularly longitudinal data.
Higher ed doesn't have data problems. Come on,
exactly.
We're perfect.
Exactly. That's why that people call one of the most popular student information systems data hell, isn't it? And the longitudinal data is particularly important. Like you don't have that closed loop data. We do. So, we work with employers. So we get on a daily basis the files of where people are, what their job title is. So we know when somebody's affected a promotion. We know how long they stay in that next role. We know generally what the kind of the economic mobility, what the payment rate is for that role. So we can measure things that other places can't, and measure what we think the outcome we know the outcome that employees are optimizing for, which is largely majority career outcome, not entirely. People, there's still an aspect of a college degree that is can be about proving something to your family, to your community, and that's important too. But we know the majority of our learners are there, specifically because they're looking for a promotion path, and we are able to measure it. That data sometimes takes time, and we're talking about, programs that completion can be measured in 6 years. So sometimes, it takes even us time to really see, what's working, but we have the closed loop opportunity to really optimize for success. And we can make that all the way up through the system. So we curate programs that are doing a good job, and we can sort of stop working with programs that aren't really meeting their promise, and so we can continue to make the learning marketplace itself better. We can better connect the member experience, how our learners are choosing what programs they go to, because we know that for somebody who wants a job in field X, program Y is the one that has the best outcome. So we have a really strong opportunity to continue to improve our system, through our unique access to data, and it's something that we definitely do. From a high-level perspective, we look at like two different optimization functions. Employers are investing in Guild because they think there's a huge return on investment, and sometimes we measure return on investment for all of our employers, and it's around like 3x. For every dollar invested, you get 300% return. So they're getting an economic investment. What they want with their investment is they want the outcomes that they're optimizing for. They want retention or job promotions, and they want it at an effective return on investment. So best outcomes, limited investment. Our students aren't paying. Our programs are, and one of the things we're proudest of as Guild is that these are, we're eliminating student debt from the system. And but they are paying with their time. They're not paying with their money, but they are paying with their time. And if you're a working adult, extra time is what you have the least of. And so we're very respectful for our students' time. And for them, the optimization function is what's the best return for the least amount of time. If you want a promotion path, what's the thing that's going to give you that promotion path in 6 months and not 6 years. And so we're constantly measuring those two, return on investment for employers, return on time for our students. And over time, we have the ability to continue to improve the entirety of our experience based on those optimization functions.
One of the fascinating things right now too is I had one of my close friends, Lisa Honecker. She's managing director of sales for FedEx Office for the Eastern U.S. And she comes on and she'll go, the battle for talent is super real. Like, it is as real as that you could imagine it ever was, to find people and keep them. And one of the things she brings up continually, it's not just about getting people the education, although that's the immediate goal, but there's other long-term organizational goals like reputation and brand building, because if you're going to invest in these people, even if they leave the organization that supported you, they're going to tell their friends that, oh, wow, I had a great experience at this organization. And maybe that person will come back, or other people will come back around to the organization, because they're trying to develop talent pipelines that are very, very hard to generate now, especially as we transition to what is this work from home thing? Are you required to go to work? Are you not? There's just so many questions around what the future of work looks like. And companies are being really smart. Some are being really smart about investing, even if those people are going to be leaving soon. Yeah. It's about investing in them now.
I totally agree. Totally agree. And you've that question very well encapsulated, like I think what a lot of our employers are feeling. The war for talent is real, and employees don't want a transactional employee experience. That's not what they're looking for. Pay is really important. Bonus is really important. Of course, those things are important, but they're looking for an employer who's going to invest in them. When they find that, they're more likely to stay. If they're engaged, there's all sorts of data about how the performance level of engaged employees versus non-engaged employees. And yeah, they become a strong proponent affinity for the brand while they work there and afterwards. And do think, we're very focused on mobility. We define it as career mobility, not just internal mobility, because it's a great opportunity to get a promotion at your company. Sometimes that's there, but if your dream is a kind of job path that your employer doesn't offer, it's good for the world. It's good for the employer itself if you get a promotion and go work in a different industry, because you're much more likely to have been motivated, excited, committed while you were working at the first company, much more likely to be a proponent of the brand, both in terms of recommending people work there, and also a consumer of the brand after you leave. Like there's value in all of that mobility. And I think the more innovative employers are starting to recognize that.
I love it. We could talk forever, but we don't have forever, do we, Paul? We do ask two final questions of every guest. I want to ask them of you now. First one is what did we not say about Guild Education, about you, Paul, that you want to say? Could be something you're working on, a product you're launching, a talk you're giving, the website if you want, anything at all that you would want to say about Guild, something I may have forgot to ask you. And then secondarily to that, what do you see as the future of higher education?
Yeah. So the first question at first is I would just say for employers who are listening to this podcast, and I think by definition, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably more innovative around these issues. If you're thinking about making an investment like Guild, now is the time, because it's getting to the point where if you're not early, you're late. This was something that innovative employers, Walmart, Disney, Chipotle were doing as to get ahead in the talent markets, and it's getting to the point where this, if you're not investing in your employees' education, that's becoming a table stakes investment. And if you're not,
you did lay out exactly how to go about it. So if you don't want this,
access denied,
then prepare so you get this.
Access granted.
Exactly. So that's the thing that is just the progression of where we are in the talent marketplace and how sort of important it is that employees are thinking along these lines, and either through Guild or otherwise, providing this type of experience, opportunity, benefit to their employers. Future of higher education. I think that we're starting to finally see the changes in higher ed that have probably been necessary for a few decades. And so I'm pretty excited. Higher education still plays an incredibly important role in the future of our society. People, however you want to define it, people need more education than they get out of a secondary environment. That's necessary because of a knowledge economy. The needs of education are just increasing. For higher education institutions to be successful in a new era, they just need to adapt their practices and really focus on the modern learner, which is largely the working adult, And I think we're in an era where a lot of changes, things that we've been talking about for years, like competency-based programs, stackable programs, credit for work or for prior learning assessments, these things that have been like conceptual but subscale for years and years and years, are now starting to happen at meaningful scale. And I think that'll only increase. This won't be great for every institution. The institution who, if you aren't either like a fairly elite institution or an institution that's going to be really successful at working adults, you might find yourself without a consumer. But for those who are on that path, I think they're going to have really exciting futures.
Well said, my friend. Boy, this was fun for me. Thank you so much, because I loved hearing the story. I used to follow Entangled, obviously, and then to see you guys merge with Guild, I think that was just a landmark, huge positive piece in the space, and want to wish you congratulations into all of those folks that you work with, and tell you that I really enjoyed this episode, man. It was an honor to have you.
Well, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know him. If you don't, follow him on LinkedIn. He's not hard to find. His name is Paul Freedman. He's the president of the Learning Marketplace at Guild Education.
Yeah.
You didn't know you were going to get the yeah. You get an applause at the beginning, yeah at the end. Paul, any last words?
No, this has really been great. And if you'll have me back, I'll come back again sometime.
Hey, look at that. Yeah, we'd love to have you back. Maybe you have a big announcement and you can come dish it here on the EdUp Experience or talk about it coming up. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another fantastic episode, in my opinion, of the EdUp Experience podcast. You've just EdUp'd. The purpose of education is to help learners discover their aptitudes and interests, develop their skills, and then deploy that knowledge to benefit themselves and others. The Charles Koch Foundation, a nonprofit grant-making organization, works with leaders in education to remove barriers that stand in the way of all learners reaching their potential. They support individualized and flexible models that improve access and quality for millions of Americans. They also support apprenticeship and upskilling programs that connect learners to in-demand jobs that match their skills and interests. The foundation is looking for new partners to challenge the status quo and transform the post-secondary education system. Learn more about their partnership opportunities and apply for a grant at ckf.org. You can also find them on Twitter at C. Koch Foundation and LinkedIn by searching Charles Koch Foundation.